Welcome to 10 Forward, where our goal is to bring fun back to Star Trek. Please have a seat. The show will begin in a moment. We hope you
Jesus
enjoy.
Christ, I'm having all
Peace
kinds of
and
problems now.
We are the Borg. Lower your shields and surrender your ships. We will add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own. Your culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile.
What?
We are the Borg. Lower your shields and surrender your ships.
All right, now let's see if I can get this to finally turn off. Come on. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. Sometimes the overlays don't go well. It's what. All right, welcome everyone. We are going to have a fun time tonight. We are going to talk Star Trek and Ford Roundtable. I am one of your panelists tonight, Nobody Geek. How y'all doing? I love Star Trek. I love everything about Star Trek 66 to 05. And tonight we are going to talk about a fun topic tonight. We are going to talk about one of the greatest villains, antagonists of all of Star Trek. We are going to talk Borg tonight. Part of my panel tonight is I have a fantastic panel as always. I have great hosts with me. Introduce yourselves, everyone. Ambassador, introduce yourself.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Ambassador, also known as, to some, as Ambassador Kosh. I cover pop culture of the 80s and 90s and everything in between. And it is a distinct pleasure to be a part of this panel once again, be a part of this channel. We are having a lot of fun. We are seeing a lot of growth. And we appreciate everybody that is subscribing, has subscribed. And let's talk Borg, because resistance is futile.
Yeah, right. And next up, right past him on the screen, Brian, Master of None. Please introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, I'm Brian Hill, the Jack of all trades, the Master of None. I like to talk a lot about Star Trek. I don't care about when it is. I love it. It's always been one of my favorite shows, and one of my favorite topics, the Borg, and my favorite movie, First Contact. So I'm ready to go tonight, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And Darth Hather, please introduce yourself to everyone. Darth Hather, are you there?
Hello. Oh, sorry.
There you. Yeah, you're okay.
Hey, I am Darth Haster. I am very, very new to the whole Star Trek thing, but I will try my best.
There's nothing wrong with that, man. Hey, we're all about having people come in, learn new stuff, and hopefully you'll walk away with some, good insight and, some good perspective. And that's what we do. And last but definitely not least, I'd like to introduce Mr. Mir, the computer. This guy makes my computer repair skills look amateur hour.
Well, as I was telling you guys earlier, I thought my computer would be a nice touch to turn it green and, just have a nice little Borg theme going on there. I'm actually in the middle of trying to adjust the brightness on this thing, just to see if I can just make it look a little less. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, I'm here to talk all things.
Yeah.
You said all things Star Trek, all things for the most part sci-fi.
Excuse me.
And I will also take things in the direction of gaming, because there are plenty of Star Trek games out there that also involve the Borg, and they need to be recognized as well.
Yes, this is true.
And yes, they do. So, yeah, the Borg. I mean, let's talk Borg, and as we like to do in this, we like to give it to our guests first. Darth Hester, have you actually seen any? I know you said you're new. Have you seen any Star Trek episodes that deal with the Borg?
Let's see. I have my experiences are TNG, Deep Space Nine, about half of the original Star Trek movies. First Contact. That'd probably be where I come in most.
Okay. Nothing wrong with that. All right. So the Borg. One of the interesting things I always like to remember about the Borg is they showed up in an episode with Q. And Q literally, I mean, when we first meet the Borg, we've met Q now, I think this might be a second or third time showing up.
This was
and
this
he basically
encounter. No, it was his third. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. This was his third encounter. This is the first time we meet it, and they shoot. He shoots the dang Enterprise all the way to the Delta Quadrant, and then you're looking at this cube. This just cube. It's very strange looking. It's just so basic. You're like, you almost thought they were being lazy in a way. Oops. And then you're watching the episode with Q, and Q's like, they do some damage, and then they try to get away, and Q's trying to tell them, you've never experienced anything like this. You have no idea what's going on out there. You don't have a clue. And Picard has to actually show a little humility and say, are you asking if I need you? Yes, Q, I need you. And I mean, that was our first introduction into the Borg. And they were just... Purple Lady, good evening. Half of the Valkyrie is here. I love having her around. She is such an awesome lady. And they have such an awesome channel.
Yeah.
If you have not subscribed to Rise of the Valkyries yet, you need to.
Yep. Hello, Purple Lady.
And David G Sound. Dave G was over on my stream this afternoon and everything. Good to see you again, friend.
So we get this this new thing with. Yeah, what's up, Ambassador? Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
I was actually going to say, speaking right on what you were saying, Jesse, that where this was actually the first time that we really saw Picard show just a little bit of humility.
Yep.
Maybe even a little bit of fear. It seemed a little.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
They're scared out of their minds. It's the first time you watch this guy. He kind of has had everything under control for the most part for a season and a half now, and then all of a sudden he's in a situation where he not only can he not control it, but he's at an absolute loss as to what to do. And it took a supernatural being to teach him, or at least to show that there is shit out there he will have no idea how to deal with.
Yeah.
And now go ahead, Ambassador. I'll follow up later.
Okay. Well, and here's the thing about the Borg. Yeah, we had the Klingons, we've had the Romulans, but this is the first time where we have a pure antagonistic race in Star Trek. Because even as aggressive as the Klingons and the Romulans were, and eventually we'll get into the Dominion and what have you, This is a antagonist in Star Trek that there really isn't any way to reason with them necessarily, for the simple fact that they are so far advanced, so far more powerful than anything that the Federation has come across up until this point. I mean, Q says it perfectly. The Romulans, the Klingons, they're nothing compared to the Borg. They're the ultimate user. And Guinan follows it up and everything at the end of the episode, Q who. Right now, to them, you are just raw material. Maybe in 100 years, or maybe when you're more advanced, you might be able to have some sort of relationship with them, or what have you, or be able to reason with them. But right now, they're out there and they're coming. And and here's the thing about the Borg. We view them as antagonists or villains, but to be perfectly candid, they are almost like a force of nature. I don't want to say a necessary evil, but they are almost, in a matter of speaking, they're
zombies, man. They're space zombies.
Yeah, more or less.
They're a cosmic entity of their own.
They are almost like a force of nature.
Yes.
You can resist that force of nature for a while, but eventually it will overwhelm you, because they do not relent. They do not run. You cannot necessarily reason with them, not unless you have something that they want to make themselves better. Now, a lot of people have been critical of the introduction of the Borg Queen, and I can understand that to a point. But I think it also adds an extra dimension, an extra layer to the Borg. Although the Borg we meet in Q Who and the Borg that we get in Best of Both Worlds, everything are very distinct, and they are that unstoppable force. I know a lot of people say that First Contact and everything introduced a dynamic into the Borg that necessarily kind of diminished them. But I think in a lot of ways, it didn't diminish them. It added some depth. It added some character to them, for the simple fact that if they had remained what they were, what we saw in Q Who and what we saw in Best of Both Worlds, they would have become kind of boring in one note.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the introduction of the Borg Queen and the portrayal by Alison Krieg and the other characters that have played the Borg Queen and everything off and on throughout the other TNG episodes was a good move.
I think it was a great move.
Yeah.
Because it introduced the Borg as not just like one race, one entity, but also of a hive mind.
Yeah, it introduced
very much
that
so.
structure.
And
it brings in that whole
and
we are legion, we are one hive mind logic that Trek really needed, kind of like that real horror of dealing with a hive mind is something else entirely. At least I think so.
Yeah,
what do I know? I'm just an Eldritch being.
Well, and Darth, I would wholeheartedly agree with you. Yes. So.
Yeah, one of the things you got to remember when Q, because remember when that episode ended, that first episode in Q Who, they lost 12 crew members because the Borg took a piece. It was
actually, but that's beside the point.
Okay, yeah, the point is, Picard talks to him and he's like, you could have taught us this without, this thing. And, he says it actually perfectly. He goes, well, if you can't take a bloody nose, you have no business being out here.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he had a point, and that was one of the things. This was a race unlike anything we had ever seen in Star Trek. We had no idea, and I disagree with the whole not adding the Borg Queen. I think adding the Borg Queen in First Contact was actually great because if I don't like it. First off, I'm going to tell you this. I think of the Borg like insects, and I hate insects. I don't like insects. But most insects, when you have a hive and a hive mind, you have what? A queen.
You have drones, you have diggers, you have workers, and you have queens.
Yeah. Exactly. So it makes total sense for that to exist, for there to be somebody in some way, shape, or form controlling all this. And yeah, we didn't get that until First Contact. And then you got to remember, the Borg only showed up in, hold on a second, I'm going to check my memory alpha here.
Actually,
6 episodes. 6 episodes of TNG.
That sounds about right to me.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't very much Borg until like Voyager.
Yeah, exactly. And the only time we saw them in DS9 was, that's one thing I will say. Let's go back. We can kind of segue into that one. We got to see the Battle of Wolf 359 in DS9. I mean, they got their asses handed to them. Mm-hmm. Handed to them. No way around it.
The captain was
good afternoon, buddy. Yes, he was. I actually looked that up. Actually, that's my favorite Klingon you mentioned. I love Martok, but
totally favorite.
Yeah, and he was playing a Vulcan.
Yeah.
On a side note, I was actually watching an episode of the Enterprise, Star Trek Enterprise, and I was like, why does this Vulcan look familiar to me? And then I realized she was the one who played the android who was Data's mother.
Oh, okay. Heck
yeah.
And very quickly I was just going to say very quickly to the chat, Jeff B, good to see you, my friend. It's been a while. Glad you could tune into this evening. So, okay, go ahead.
Jeff B, glad to have you, man. Great to see you here. But yeah, I mean, that first episode, and we need to remember the Borg were hinted at in the very first season of TNG when the whole scooping up of the whole scooping up of planets and the Romulans and stuff. So they were hinted, but then it was at that time they were only looking for certain technology. But even as the Borg had only been on a few episodes, and as much as I've made it kind of clear, Voyager is not. It is my least favorite of all Star Trek series as of this moment. And this is coming from a guy who's binging all Star Trek right now. And I got done with Voyager, but I will say those Borg episodes were kick-ass. And we got to see what I wanted to see, an evolution of characters, an evolution of an ideology. And if we hadn't have done that, the Borg would have been a one-dimensional villain, for lack of anything, and I'm going to go DC here, like that freaking Steppenwolf from Justice League. Yeah. I mean, nobody wants a one-dimensional villain. We want a villain to actually, if you're going to make them the ultimate bad guy, you got to give us something to look at. You got to either give us a reason to like them, root for them, or hate them.
Well, and that's the great thing about the Borg, because I think it's a season after Best of Both Worlds, we get the episode with Hugh. Because that episode brings a lot of depth and a lot of different perspective on the Borg. Because here you have a Borg that's relatively young, who's disconnected from, is separated from the hive to a certain degree. And you've got this whole dilemma and everything about, do they use him to destroy the Borg, or do they just send him back? And there is this big debate, because you have Guinan in this episode, and she goes down to the brig and everything where they have Hugh being held. and all she has is hatred for him. It's justified. It is completely justified because Guinan tells him the Borg destroyed her people, scattered them to the furthest sides of the galaxy, and she has every reason to hate him. And she goes to Picard and she's like, do you know how many people I've today heard talking about this Borg? And they're calling him Hugh, and they're treating him like a little lost puppy, and she has nothing but justifiable animosity for him. But as the episode goes on, everybody starts to have a different perspective on the Borg because of this one drone that got separated and everything. And they realize the danger. They're not dumb and everything about it. But I think that is a great episode after Best of Both Worlds and everything that kind of builds upon the structure of the Hive. And
that was that.
Go ahead.
And that was actually that was the halfway point, because if you think about it, the Borg didn't show up until Q. Then they showed up in Best of Both Worlds. And I mean, that was, the whole thing. And you got to remember how long they waited. I mean, yes, you could say they waited a season, but you got to remember the only time we saw the Borg first was in season 2, about episode 16. And then we didn't see the Borg again until the end of season 3. And you got to remember, we're talking 26 episodes. And then the Borg show up, and I will say this. One thing about the original Ray they did Star Trek was, in that time frame, was when they had a good villain, or a good antagonist, like Q or the Borg, they were smart enough to use them sparingly. They didn't go out there and use them all the time because that's overdone. I mean, there's no reason to have them all the time. But man, when we get the Best of Both Worlds, and we think we know, and we've got to talk about Best of Both Worlds here. So Mir, since you're being quiet, I want you to take it away and talk about Best of Both Worlds, man. Come on, give me some.
Well, I actually want to go. I want to go back to Q who for a second. Says this
sure
again. This is what sets the premise for Best of Both Worlds, and this is from the Borg's perspective. Here you have there's nothing on their scanners. All of a sudden, this ship just pops out of nowhere of an unknown configuration, that was doing something like warp 37 to go and show up on this side of the galaxy. And listening to what Guinan says all they're interested in is the technology. And so they go and they do they cut open a set of that piece of the saucer section, and they analyze everything, and they come on board to the ship and they're analyzing everything, and they can't find out how they got there in the first place. So then they're like, okay, well, we're going to take over your vessel. And so Federation says no. So they're trying to hightail it back to the Alpha Quadrant. Now you see, right in the middle of them catching up to them, they're firing their torpedo beams, they're knocking the shields out, they're pulling them out of warp, they're getting ready to go, and then all of a sudden, boom, they go to warp 37 and are all the way back over into the Alpha Quadrant again. The Borg, at this point, the Borg are singularly focused on that technology. How did they go so fast? How did they get from here all the way back over into the Alpha Quadrant in a span of a couple of minutes? I guarantee you that same Borg ship that was coming out that was in Q is the same exact one that was heading out into the Alpha Quadrant to go and take on the Federation. They want that technology of how the hell these people are going so fast. This is like nothing they've ever seen before. So now they can't get that information out of the Federation from their ship. Now we get to the Best of Both Worlds. Well, how are we going to get this information? I know. Let's take over one of their command officers and see if he has the secret. So that's when they come onto the ship and they grab Picard and turn him into Locutus. So now Now they find out that, hey, you know what? This came from this, polydimensional being known as Q. We can't really do anything about that. But these guys have a lot of technology. They got a lot of parts. Hey, let's go take it all over. We could add to our collective. Take all of our technology. Now you get to the best of both worlds. And then they got completely outsmarted by a rudimentary system. The whole thing gets taken over because they got put to sleep and put into a positive feedback loop and destroyed. That is just with everything that's going on. It was unconventional. It was just so beautiful how they just figured out, no, you're not. Now it's still like, you're not getting that secret from us. And they still want that secret, although at this point now they probably have transwarp technology. They're showing up on that anyway, so it becomes completely redundant. But now getting into the whole thing at Wolf 359. This is something you see that's kind of out of the norm. You're seeing, we don't know this at the time, but the Borg have this hive structure, and they have specifically a queen. Why are they taking on a king? It would make more sense for a queen to go and make the announcement and say, hey, you guys are going to be adapted to service us. But instead, they have Picard as this ambassador because, honestly, I think they had no other purpose for him. We still can't find that ultra fast speed, warp technology. So, yeah, what are you gonna? What? We'll just have him as the ambassador for the Alpha Quadrant. I
gotta be honest, Mir. I didn't even give that any thought.
I mean, it's just
that's amazing. I never even thought about that.
It's just something that seeing it from the Borg's perspective is just like, hey, you know what? They have this ultra fast technology, like a get out of jail free card. We want that, especially if they're coming up against like species 8472. Here's a great example. Hey, we want to get out of jail free card to get away from them real fast. Absolutely. So yeah, so I always take the Borg from a different perspective than a lot of people. Now going into Borg, you see a Borg that is in communication with the collective, but still is putting that, showing that he can have a unique personality. And
one of the sorry, hold on, real second, Mayor. One of the things we were never told was ever was how long was Hugh a Borg? I mean, you gotta, that was one of the things. 7 and 9 was an interesting aspect, and we really got into Borg's psyche when they're separated from the collective. In Voyager, she was 7 and 9 was a child, whereas for all we as an infant, or even so
that's
we
another
had
thing
no.
That's kind of interesting too.
They didn't get much of that backstory.
In what was it in Q Who when they went and opened up the Borg nursery, and they had parts on toddlers. Like, I'm wondering if that was their initial method of reproduction, like where they were doing like either cloning technology or. They would
No, Mir. Remember,
maturation
the Borg
chambers.
The maturation chambers.
Yeah.
The Borg cannot. The Borg cannot. One of the flaws with the Borg is they can't produce technology. They can only assimilate it. They can't create their own technology. They have no imagination, no understanding of ingenuity and engineering. All they know is the only way to improve our species is we must take on other people.
Yes.
And
that is.
And with that, I'm gonna.
And that is their main.
With that, real quick,
that is their main thing.
Yes.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but
no.
It is to assimilate and make their species better for the betterment of said species, whether it be Borg or Even Zerg from StarCraft, I see a lot of similarities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. My whole thing on that is like not necessarily at that point, but we're at this point. We didn't have that information. According to what Guinan was saying, is that they only had they were only interested in the technology. That technology could have included a cloning facility. See, but we just did not have that information at the time.
Darth asks, Brian, Master of None, what do you think, buddy? Let's hear your thoughts.
Well, it kind of leads me to follow up on Borg. It always naturally leads into the sequel to that, which would be Descent Part 1 and 2.
Yep.
Where Hugh goes back to the collective and wrecks shop with the ship that he's on because he introduces individuality to the collective. And Lore, Data's brother, decides to take advantage of that fact. It's very interesting, and it also, adds another layer to the Borg. And then after that, we go into like First Contact. Here's one of the things I think, because First Contact basically throws everything into a loop because they go back in time. And not only that, but they do build an interplexing beacon and they do activate it for a few seconds. So I'm also wondering, could that have been, that signal 200 years in the past and the Borg's just now getting there? Or like similar to the Enterprise episode where, they find the Borg that crashed on Earth in the Arctic. So that it would be another reason for them to potentially come, knowing that all the way back then.
Yeah, so I think like in the Enterprise episode, they went and like they said that they actually got the signal off.
Yeah.
And so it would take like 160 years for it to get out there or something to that extent. Something along those lines. So, yeah, it could potentially have taken that long for it to come back. Just never knew.
Well, and I also kind of wish Voyager would have gotten more into the Elorian aspect of it.
Yeah.
Because it would have given more depth to Guinan as well as Dr. Soren from Generations. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was a pretty decent villain as well, as far as like standalone and stuff like that. But the experience with the Borg, I think that if they would have gotten a little more into that, it would have helped for people that have never really watched the show for watching the movie kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's something I really wish they would have expanded on as well. I mean, it would have only made sense if the Elorians had also like went to other parts of the Delta Quadrant as well as the Alpha Quadrant and Beta Quadrants. You just at this point you only see what, 2 Elorians in total?
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There should be a lot more to that species that no one has ever touched.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then not only that, but like Guinan being way back in time, so she's obviously traveled, throughout. I'm sure there's more than just the one.
Absolutely. So even then, how many were left over at the end of at the beginning of Generations?
47, I think.
Yeah, I think it was something like that.
Out of 150.
What was the question?
How many Elorians were left over, or were left after the ship was destroyed in Generations?
Oh, that was one of the. That was only a refugee ship. That wasn't necessarily the entire Elorian race.
No, it wasn't. It's just
it was a couple. Actually, it was a couple of ships and everything, refugee ships that the Enterprise B had encountered, and everything. So, yeah, honestly, and here's something I like about the Borg, and we've kind of touched upon this. Less is more. The less you know about them, the more interesting they are. Now, I know that there have been origins that have been done about the Borg, and like I think it's Enterprise and maybe Voyager or something. I know that much. So I like the fact that we don't get a whole lot. We do get bits and pieces. Now, for those of you that watch Enterprise, you can probably check me on this. Doesn't Noonien Soong and everything have some sort of interaction with the early version of the Borg on Enterprise? Because I know Noonien Soong makes an appearance in Enterprise. The
no, it's with the augments.
No, he's dealing with the augment thing. That's the Eugenics Wars thing. No, he has nothing to do with it. The Borg do show up in one episode of Enterprise, but they don't know who it is at the time. I mean, we all know who it is, but they don't have a damn clue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
and with that, hey, Darth Haster or Brian Master or None, do you guys have anything to add? Because I want to kind of post something here that I'm dying to bring up about iBorg.
I got something. I think it's really interesting that the whole, I guess, assimilation and the relationship with everything. Actually, I don't know where I'm going off on this. I kind of lost my train of thought. Sorry.
It's okay, buddy. It happens. And hey, don't feel bad about cutting anybody off. We cut each other off all the time. We are here to have fun. We are not here to do anything else but have fun. So, and if I don't cut people off, and the ambassador will, because otherwise we'll get too long into something.
I know he will.
All right. How about the Borg episode that pissed everybody off? That just totally broke your continuity.
Okay, let's hear it.
Mine's definitely Scorpion. That one just actually.
We can get there in a minute, but I actually want to still talk about. I still want to talk about Q-Hugh. Brian, do you have anything to add before I talk about Q-Hugh? Because I do have some things I want to bring up.
No, other than Q-Hugh, I mean, one of my favorite parts on that episode was when they cut a hole, right out of the Enterprise. That was a really interesting.
It was, especially for back then.
Yeah.
No, you're right. You're right. It was Hugh. Well, when I get to iBorg, I was thinking about this. They get that. Remember, this is at the best of both worlds, and I know we're kind of passing over the best of both worlds, but I mean, let's be honest. That's probably been talked to death sometimes.
Yes,
and
everybody knows that.
We all know the we all know the ramifications and everything. But let's look at the PTSD. And for those of you who don't know, I'm retired military. My wife is actually 22 days from retirement from the military, man. 22 days to go. It's awesome.
Nice.
Look on the bright side, man. It's the race you're always winning.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, when you get to Q2, when you get to iBorg, not Q2, that's later. You have this whole thing where, Picard is got massive PTSD. Something I've made it very clear that sequel episode of Best of Both Worlds, I actually think is equal, and I think it should not be considered a sequel. I think that those 3 episodes should be considered a trilogy, because you had Best of Both Worlds 1, Best of Both Worlds 2, and then you had, and I'm trying to remember the name, and it's escaping me the name after that. Yes, Family. Thank you. I just didn't know if that was the right. And you saw Picard have to break down and be, when his brother says, well, Picard is human after all. This is going to be with you for a long time. And Picard never got over. I don't care how much he tried to say it. And this is coming from my wife and I. We know about PTSD. I don't care how much people try to say. You don't get over it. It doesn't go away. It's like, I hate to say it, but it's like an addiction. Once you've experienced that, it never leaves you. You're never going to not. So the way he portrayed his anger and stuff. But here's the thing. This is where I was going to go with iBorg. The ethical question or the moral question of committing genocide on a species. And I wanted to say, I've made it very clear. I think Cisco would have sent the virus and not given it a second thought had the roles been reversed. But Picard decided not to do it, and he said we'd be no better than the Borg. And that's one of those moments where I was like, no, this is a species that has committed genocide on an unconscionable scale that you would have probably have saved billions of lives had you done that. So I'm always of the think that I think Picard made the wrong decision there. And, I may be on the wrong side of the ethical issue on that one, but I look at it from a military perspective. And in my mind, Picard should have sent Hugh back with the virus. I don't care that he was an individual. Sorry, dude, you're the sacrificial lamb. That's my view on it. It's probably not a popular opinion with many Star Trek fans because it goes against the idea of Star Trek. But here's the thing. How many billions of lives could have been saved from the time of that episode to by the time we got to the end of Voyager, the last time we saw them in the timeline continuity, not including Enterprise?
I see what you mean there when you say leave him on the planet, because one versus your whole ship or the whole home planet.
Mm-hmm. And
yeah, I see where you're going with that, and I agree. But yeah, I think he did make a dumb decision there. But
he did, yeah. And I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but they was it Admiral Nechayev?
Yeah,
She
I
went
remember.
And talked to him about that and raked his ass over the coals for that shit. He's like,
that's one of the few times. That's one of the few times he deserved it.
Yeah, I mean, well, she never really liked him in the first place, but oh my God, she was really, really pissed off at that decision that Picard had made.
Yeah.
Along with quite a few others.
Well, you got to look at it this way. We're talking about, okay, we're going to commit genocide of a race. And I'm like, this race commits genocide. This is like we topple, in the military, we fight governments and we destroy governments. We destroy the collective of a government in hopes of a better government coming about. And, they just, he let his morality or his ethics get in the way. And I disagreed with that. Yes, I like the Borg, and I'm glad we got him in Voyager, but he's for his we're responsible for our actions. We are also responsible for our inactions. And that was an inaction that cost billions of lives.
It did. But there's also, I don't even remember this or not, there was an episode in season 3, I believe it was called The Survivors, in which Enterprise had gone out to a colony and everyone was dead except for 2 people on a little tract of land. And it turned out that the husband was an alien that had actually turned around and committed genocide. And, he was that in that moment, they killed his wife. And in that moment, he just thought about it and he wiped out an entire species. And here he was trying to deal with the ramifications of that decision. And it was screwing him up.
He annihilated the Huspa.
Was it the Varushnak was the name?
No, the Hushpa. Yeah. And he said, was the life of one and he said, was the life of one person worth 50 million?
Yeah.
Well, was the life of possibly billions of Borg drones worth the life of the billions they assimilated? And, this is an ethical question that I think is very important because it is, where do you draw your lines? And those are moral questions that are hard to, like I said, I feel if Cisco, and I have said this, if Cisco had been the one assimilated and he had been Locutus and he had been revived, and he had been in charge of the Enterprise during Borg,
it would have been a very different story.
Oh, he'd have sent Hugh back, no problem. But I'm not saying which episode. I'm not saying which one is right or wrong. I'm just saying, I don't agree with Picard's decision in that episode. And there are a few times I disagree with Picard, but in that episode, yeah, I am dead set. I'm like, you should have just done it, bit the bullet, and asked whatever God you believe in for forgiveness.
He could have saved untold millions and billions of lives across an entire galaxy by introducing the virus that would have broken down the Borg's command.
Well, hell, the Federation
could have
had a problem with
That's
what they did to the founders.
Yeah,
and that was probably one of the hardest decisions he's ever had to make in his entire career as a captain.
I honestly think his decision is that point is that decision is not on par with the captain's salary. And he just couldn't get a hold of an admiral at that point in time.
He didn't have a Section 31 agent in his back pocket.
That's what I'm saying. A special black communicator for in case of emergency, break glass.
And, here's the thing, and most everybody knows I am a very devout Christian. But here is how I approach the episode of Borg. Even if I had not been assimilated, even if I had not been someone that was had a loved one at the Battle of Wolf 359, okay, let's be candid here. It wasn't a battle; it was a slaughter.
No, it was a massacre. That was a massacre.
Okay, the massacre of Wolf 359. If I am, and I hate to play armchair captain or armchair anything, but here's the thing. Even with my faith in play, I ask myself the question: how many billions of lives, seemingly maybe trillions of lives, can I save if I make that decision and send Hugh back with the virus to the Borg Collective? And I'm talking about the destructive virus that they had concocted or created, not the one where every Borg gets to have a moment of individuality, but the virus that they had constructed that would have destroyed the collective down to the last drone. Would I have made that choice if I was in the place of Picard? Yes. In a heartbeat, I would have. Why? To quote a great mind from Star Trek, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Picard, or the one, Picard dropped the ball. And I know that many of us here, myself included, consider Picard one of the best captains in Star Trek, and he is. But to look at this pragmatically, Picard screwed up.
I think so.
Because here is the thing. Consider the untold devastation that the Borg have wrought long before they ever came across the Federation. Consider all the lives that are lost at Wolf 359 and when they assimilate Picard into the collective and all the destruction that he wrought unwittingly. I want to emphasize that unwittingly, because he couldn't fight against the collective, against that programming. I'm sure he tried, but that programming is too powerful.
And if you watch Family, the Ambassador, you'll know that he said, "I fought everything I could, and I couldn't win."
Right,
and it was really one of the first times where he had to realize he was vulnerable. and it added a definite layer of humanity. But he's like, I fought so hard and I couldn't beat it. I couldn't win, and he realized I was screwed, and he's unfortunately unwillingly, like many drones, responsible for billions of possibly no, sorry, not billions, but he was
Trillions.
responsible for the death of all those officers at Wolf 359. They enlisted him in the crew. I mean, when he and Cisco meet, Cisco hates him.
Yes,
absolutely.
Cisco has nothing but resentment and hatred, even though he probably knows all the details of what happened to Picard. But here, getting back to my point, then I'll yield my. I'll shut up for a few minutes. I would have sent Hugh back with the virus. I would have lived with that on my conscience because I know deep down that was the right decision for the Federation, for the Alpha, Beta, and Gamma quadrants, and for seemingly the galaxy as a whole. Because the Borg, they cannot be reasoned with, they cannot be coerced or dissuaded. They are an unstoppable force, and the only way you can destroy and you can negate an unstoppable force is to wipe it out down to nothing. And that virus would have done it. They had the means, but I'm going to emphasize this one final time. Picard didn't have the stomach to live with that choice, and he screwed up. And he cost more lives after the fact, after his assimilation was done. With that, I yield the floor.
And then we get to a little, what is it called? An episode in Star Trek Voyager called Scorpion, in which Captain Janeway negotiates with the Borg that can't be negotiated with.
They did it because they were desperate because the species, what was it, A471?
A472.
A472, yeah.
A472. All right. Darth Haster, do you have anything you want to add about that? Have you seen Scorpion yet?
No, but I think they about covered it.
Okay, go ahead.
And I do agree. I do agree with it. What Ambassador said about Picard having a hellaciously hard time with his decision.
Well,
but the problem,
the
thing I always had with it, the thing I always had a problem with his decision was he wasn't wavering on it until, I hate to say it, and Guinan actually is the one who changed his mind. And I was like, Guinan, of all people, your race is literally, I mean, I wanted to be like, your race is an endangered species. Your race is now nomadic. They don't have a home. They don't have maybe a government. They don't have, anything now. Their homeworld's gone, and it was the Borg's fault. And, she's like, you're going to take this person. He goes, it's not a person, damn it, it's Borg. And I'm like, I as much as I hate to say it, but they should have squashed the bug. Like they should have squashed the Borg like they were bugs, because that's all they are. Yep. In my mind, is they're literally insects. And insects are an annoyance. They're a pain in our ass. And the Borg were the worst kind of insect ever possible. And they did not care. And I would equate them to being like in T1 when Terminator 1, for example. I'm going to say the guy who played, Michael, was it Michael Biehn?
Michael Biehn played Kyle Reese. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be bargained with. They do not feel remorse or pity or fear, and they will not stop ever. And
until you are dead.
Yeah, and
or they're destroyed.
Yeah, well, Sylvis Borg, everything brings up an interesting comment. Locutus did his duty.
Yes, he did.
Now that comment right there, Sylvis Borg, that says a lot. Because here is the thing. In that episode, I Am Borg, Picard almost regresses back to when he was Locutus, when he was there in his ready room. Have we possibly overlooked something? Could there possibly have been some holdover programming from Picard's assimilation?
Oh, quite possibly.
That was triggered and coerced him into not. Now, I'm not saying this is a fact. It's never stated, but this is just a theory that Sylvis Borg and Sylvis Borg well said. You said much with little. Is it possible that there is some sort of holdover protocol from when Picard was in the collective that he decided to make the choice of not destroying the Borg and in fact send Hugh back with the other program that they cooked up?
I have an interesting thought on that one though.
Go ahead.
So here's the thing about it, and also kind of the hypocrisy of the movie First Contact. Okay, so I think the reason why Picard didn't do it is because he didn't want to succumb to revenge. And like I said, the hypocrisy of it is if you watch him in First Contact, that's what he's all about.
He's about his revenge.
until he smashes his little ships and realizes that, I think it's always been in Picard's character to defend the individual against the collective. It's always something that he's done. So I think it was within character of him to not send him back.
No, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. One of the biggest problems I always had, like I said, is I just thought he did the wrong thing. And then, you had Picard say, in First Contact, and I know we're kind of jumping ahead. He's like, they assimilate our whole worlds and we fall back. They destroy all societies and we fall back. No, the line must be drawn here, now, no further. And it was one of the best lines. And then he reneged.
2 seconds later.
Because of a human. I mean, it was one of the best lines ever. And he reneged. But yeah, I mean, the Borg were a clear and present danger to not just the Federation, but to everything ever. I mean, there was nothing to stop them from doing what you couldn't read. That's why I said I equate them to kind of Terminator, whereas you couldn't really reason with them. I mean, I know in Voyager, and we're coming up on an hour, so I think we're going to have to maybe do another episode of Voyager just based on Borg, because we've really got a lot there, but we've been on almost an hour now, and we're still talking about the 6 episodes in TNG, and we haven't even gotten to Descent 1 and 2 yet. So if you guys are good, I'd like to go a little bit further so we can at least get through the TNG episodes.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I think we have to come up with a very distinct separation line. Like, for example, you have the 5 or 6 episodes that are in TNG where you saw that a single Borg could be reasoned with, and that the collective has been broken down and went up into Descent. Then you have the separation of, we are the Borg, lower your shields and surrender your vessels. That kind of goes into First Contact and on.
Yeah. I'd say either Descent or First Contact is
it feels like point. You're dealing with 2 very separate Borg at that point.
Yeah.
Well, remember, the Borg assimilate, so they adapt as they assimilate culture. So
they do, but
I hate to say it, but actually, I don't hate to say it, but I think the Borg were actually, if they assimilated the wrong species, they'd actually create their own destruction.
Well, that's kind of what Icheb's parents did. I mean, I'm not going to talk about Voyager, but just to add to what you're saying, his parents gave him a virus, and every time he got assimilated, they would hope that it would, infect the collective. So, I mean, it's a possibility. I know we don't really want to talk about the new Star Trek, but they do kind of bring it up in Picard a little bit, with one of the Romulans getting assimilated that has knowledge of the whole, premonition. So it's very interesting on how they keep doing that, and the mistake of assimilating the wrong thing. Like you say, it's kind of like an insect. I mean, sometimes insects step on the wrong thing and pay the price.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And okay, guys, with that, let's get into Descent, and we'll end it with those 2 episodes. This was the consequence of Borg. This was and hold on a second, I'm going to go to Memory Alpha. And Borg was episode 5 TNG, season 5 TNG, episode 23. And Descent was episode 6, 26, and season 1, episode 7. So, they had enough sense to spread it out. But then they, now all of a sudden the Borg show up, and it's like they're individuals. And it's strange. And then, Riker says it was more like fighting Klingons than Borgs, no offense. And it was like, yeah, we were all kind of watching that episode, especially me as a child. And I was about 8, 9 years old. And, these Borg are not acting like Borg, not the Borg I knew. And I only seen them in a few episodes. And they're violent.
They're angry, man.
But then you get Hugh, and Hugh's like, why are you here, Commander? Hasn't the Enterprise already done enough problems? And, this was an amazing, I think a great development for Hugh's character, where, he's actually mad that they freed him from the collective, and, all the death of other Borgs and stuff. And Locutus was not Locutus, sorry, Lore. There you go. Yeah, Lore was allowed to take them over, and they said, "You don't understand," and he's right. They didn't understand. They didn't know how a hive mind worked. Lore was able to get them into leadership, and he said something that was actually profound. And if you think about it, when you're desperate, you look for leadership anywhere you can find it. And if you find someone who is going to try and get you out of a bad situation,
you won't question their morality.
You're going to do it. Well, I mean, how do you question the morality of it? You're a Borg drone. You've assimilated 100 species. Why would you? You're like, okay, I've lost I'm not connected to the hive. We have to adapt. And they had to try and figure out how to adapt. And, as much as, I love First Contact, it was so very, how do I put this? It changed the nature of the Borg in such a way that it almost became unrecognizable to me for a while.
Yeah.
Because
that's kind of what I was getting at about that separation. You have up until Descent, and then you have First Contact, and then you have that changed the Borg for every iteration after that.
Well, I kind of look at it this way. They did it. They changed visually a lot because they had the budget.
Yes.
And all the Borg that they used in Voyager were from the movie First Contact. So when they made First Contact, they just started over in terms of the design on those. And to be perfectly honest, I mean, they looked a lot better from that point on, because especially like Q-Who, or with the first episode, it's like the Borg are like, and then, once you get into Best Both Worlds, the evolution looks a lot better as far as like character design. And it's like that for any of the aliens on there. I mean, look at the Cardassians. They had this weird face mask thing on there when they first, were introduced.
Yeah.
And it covered up the spoon. So it was really difficult. or Romulans or Klingons for that matter. I mean, the original series, they didn't have the budget to give them foreheads or anything like that. It wasn't until the movies, and then they kind of explained that away.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. They really went into it with but when you come to Descent, you've got all these individual these individual Borg who don't know what to do with themselves. They don't know how to act. And even Lore says this was your fault. Lore actually, for one of the few times he was on, was like, no, you caused this. This was your fault. You gave them the ability to act as individuals, but they didn't know how to do it. And we're not going to get into Voyager tonight. Obviously, we'll save that for a later date. But when you look at a Borg getting separated from the collective, we've only seen that literally a few times in all of Star Trek lore. I mean, you have Hugh, you have 7 and 9, but we don't know when Hugh was assimilated. We do know 7 and 9 was assimilated as a child, and it makes sense. Yeah, so Annika was 7 of 9's first name, and she was assimilated as a child. So of course she would look for that kind of parental protection and stuff. Whereas Hugh, we don't know. We don't know why he easily assimilated so much easier than 7 of 9.
For all we know, he could have been the baby Borg in Q-Who. In the Borg maturation chamber. He could have been a cradle to, mature Borg, and it would have never known anything different.
Well, don't forget, remember, in Voyager, they said these Borg, when they assimilated using a Star Wars reference, younglings or children, they assimilated them, put them in a maturation chamber, and they were supposed to stay there until they were, adults.
Yeah.
And yeah. So we have no idea how long Hugh was there. As far as we know, Hugh never saw life prior to being a Borg. For all we know, he was. I wouldn't be surprised if he was an Infoborg.
Well,
and I mean that's what.
This also brings up another. Again, one of the points I was also trying to make earlier is that even up until this point, with the exception of Picard or becoming Locutus, we have no idea how the Borg changed, and they have no idea if they had taken people from planets and assimilated them, or if they were really up until Q-Who, when he starts saying that you will be assimilated like Picard was. Just didn't really know if they were taking out their technology or using something else to create Borg, or if it was it's just straight up assimilating people.
Well, and here's the thing too, because in Best of Both Worlds, we see Picard's transformation.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. We see a technology jump for the Borg and everything in First Contact, because if you notice, they have those probes that they will inject into a person that introduces the transformative nanites into a person. So my guess is there was the technology jump at Best of Both Worlds. They got their hands on nanite technology, and they were able to adapt it to where they could much more easily assimilate a person.
I just don't think that the Borg as a species in Trek wasn't fleshed out yet. They just didn't come up with how they actually, how did Borgs become make little Borgs?
And here's the thing. The other thing you got to remember.
Hey, Ambassador, let the guests talk.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Either that or they assimilated nanites in general.
Mm-hmm.
That's possible.
Potentially, yeah.
Well, remember, like I said, they don't build, they assimilate. So they don't have a concept of um imagination and stuff, and but still they are powerful, and they're deadly, and they're scary. And I mean, literally, other than species 8472,
Mhm.
they are literally the most dangerous species in the entire galaxy.
Yeah,
That we
pretty
They
come
are.
much.
across, yeah.
Is
All
it
right.
when
The Dominion's pretty bad though.
just when they came up with the whole concept of the first contact Borg, because again, I'm considering these guys very separate. That established the Borg as the space zombie.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know,
Or the vampire.
a massive wave of pestilence. And they do not replicate sexually; they replicate through either a bite or infection. Yeah, that's there.
All
You go.
right, and
There's your
you know
zombie.
what? And with that being said, let's hit this last section before we call it a night, guys, and
Okay.
let's talk first. Let's talk first contact, and then eventually, when we get back to the Borg, we'll talk Voyager in the future. But yeah, let's talk first contact, and Brian, I think, has some things to say about that because he's got a big old smile on his face. So take it away, Brian.
Well, let's go back to 1996 for a minute here. I was in 8th grade when the movie came out, and I was like balls deep in everything Star Trek at that point. Voyager was just coming out around that time, and it was the first movie I ever saw opening weekend, and I saw it twice. But no, I absolutely loved the movie. I will admit it hasn't aged very well in comparison. Actually, I'm not really well. If you compare it to like the original movies, which I think aged very well, First Contact didn't. And there are a couple glaring things that happened in that movie that changed the course of the Borg and stuff like that. Especially anytime you have to deal with time travel in a movie, you're going to end up with that kind of stuff. But as far as I was saying earlier about like the whole part of revenge, I think that was how the movies were marketed, was more of like an action oriented type story where you wanted to get, that fiery Picard moment, when he does say this far and no further, and turns around with the rifle and smashes up the glass in the conference room. And Lily, a less evolved human at that point, and he made sure to tell her that that we don't succumb to revenge, but here he is, showing it. And I think the Enterprise has always been like an island of humanity and individual freedom. And I think just Picard's experience with the Borg and that hate to say the word, but the assault, the rape of him, that left him broken. And the fact that he was able to, one, fight them off, and two, do it with utmost courage, especially facing down the Borg Queen at the end of that movie. I mean, that's why it's my favorite of the Next Generation movies, hands down.
Yeah, that was his PTSD just showing up big time when he decided to go and break all his models.
Mm-hmm. Big time.
Darth Haster, have you seen First Contact yet?
Yeah, he pretty much covered all the bases, and I don't know how to top that.
But yeah,
you don't have to top it. Just give your thoughts, buddy.
Well, my thoughts are, as I'm trying to think of it from the perspective of the Borg, and I think that it is just, you're right. The Borg behave totally different from what we have previously stated. That is true. But from what gives us that behavior is yet to be seen. Maybe it will be revealed later on. Who knows?
Yeah, to me, this is the movie that established the Borg as what we know now. You know, it just did a massive lore expansion into how they function. They're now the hive mind. You got the head of the hive mind. You have the way that the Borg reproduce. You see them as basically the galactic pestilence of the Star Trek universe. And
the galactic plague.
They are unstoppable. They are singularly focused. They're at the whim of the Queen, and get in their way, and they will assimilate you.
Well, in the addition,
if I had to compare them to anything, and I'm sorry whoever I cut off there, I don't know if that was Dark Aster or Brian, but no, it was anyway. The Borg are like literally, as far as as I said, I compare them to insects. They're literally like the freaking locust. They're like locusts. I mean, they just come in, destroy everything, leave, and don't care what happens after the fact.
Nope, not at all.
They take, they eat, they leave.
Out of curiosity, did anyone here get to see the Star Trek experience in Las Vegas?
No.
Yes.
So
yes, I did. I got to see it before. I got to see it back when I was in the Marine Corps. Back in about I think it was 2000. It was before 9/11, so it had to be 99 or 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in Las Vegas. Yeah, I remember it. Yeah, I was there, and actually, I was wearing a certain shirt of a RPG game I was playing, and somebody asked me about that. I actually got a free meal in Quark's bar because of my shirt.
Were you playing EverQuest?
I was playing a game you probably have never. I was playing a game probably many of you have never heard of. I was playing Vampire. No, Vampire the Masquerade.
Yeah, I know that one.
Vampire the Masquerade.
I like Vampire the Masquerade.
Yeah. Didn't they just put a new one out like last year or the year before?
Who said it like Vampire the Masquerade? Darth Aster, was that you?
Yes, I'm a big tabletop RPG kind of guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love tabletop RPGs.
Yes,
so
I refer them as dice, but yeah. Hold on a second, Mir.
Go ahead.
Nah, I was just saying. Yeah, I was a big pen and paper RPG guy back in the day, and Vampire the Masquerade actually was a favorite of us because it only had one die type, not like D&D that
it was a
D10.
Die. It was a D10 base.
Yeah,
exactly, and. But yeah, Vampire the Masquerade was fun, and this probably wouldn't shock anybody if you look at me, but I always picked Gangrel. If you know what that is, which
I do, and tell you the truth, no surprise there.
What did you pick, Darth Aster? What was your preferred vampire clan? Yeah, if you don't know, here's the thing about that RPG game.
Nosferatu, baby. Nosferatu.
The Nosferatu. Oh, my God.
The ugly ones. The crawling in caves. The primal ones.
Hey, you know what, Darth Aster? We'll talk about that online, man. I got some great stories I could tell you about some of the times we played either Vampire the Masquerade or Vampire Dark Ages. And actually, Dark Ages was almost... Oh, yeah. Yeah,
I haven't played Dark Ages. I haven't played Dark Ages. I've been wanting to, and I've been meaning to pick it up. But is it good?
Yes, it is. But like I said, when you look at the Borg, yeah. But when you look at the Borg and you look at a villain in a show, I mean, you can't get talk about a villain like, oh my God, we're going to get screwed. And, they had this sense too. And Gene Roddenberry was still alive at the time. So he had to approve this.
Absolutely.
And he had to approve that there was going to be something superior. Remember, one of the things in Star Trek is up until that point, everything was on an equal playing field. Some people had certain technology, some people didn't. But the Borg, they just could kick anybody's ass, and that was going to be the end of the day. You were shit out of luck, and you were screwed.
Well, besides bugs and things to draw from on the Borg, where they got the Borg mythology, I would have to say either insect life or demonic behavior from, I don't know, Legion from biblical lore. Well, and even probably Ambassador would agree with this. One. Yes, we are one, but we are many.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly,
yeah, exactly.
I could definitely see
some similarities.
I could see some similarities or anything with some sort of maybe demonic possession in terms of the Legion or anything, the one that is many. So the thing I would say about the Borg is I don't like I understand it's kind of done tongue-in-cheek and everything, the whole concept of space zombies. But here's the thing. Zombies don't really think on a higher level. They run on pure instinct. The Borg don't run on pure instinct. They have a hive mind mentality, and they have, let's just say, maybe thousands of years or hundreds of years of collective knowledge within that collective.
Yes.
And they use that knowledge to advance themselves, to make themselves better. Now, yeah, obviously they can't procreate in the traditional sense, so they have to assimilate. But the reason that they assimilate is, one, to obviously increase their numbers, but two, to gain more knowledge. And honestly, and we really haven't touched on this at all, and I'll touch on it very briefly. In Star Trek the Motion Picture, there has been a lot of fan theory, and I don't know if it has been canonized, but there's been a lot of fan theories rolling around. V'ger encountered a proto-Borg society or something. And if you think about it, if you really think about V'ger's interaction with that proto-Borg species, learn all that is learnable, know all that is knowable. That's essentially what the Borg are trying to do themselves.
Yep, they're trying to achieve perfection.
Touch the creator.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and we even get the Borg tagline, "Resistance is futile," and guess who says it? Spock.
Spock.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it is very possible that at some point, maybe during the encounter between the Enterprise and between V'ger may have overheard that through the probe or whatever, and it got transmitted back to the Borg, one of the Borg worlds that V'ger had encountered. And they were like, there's something to this.
Yes, this theory actually came about through a video game that was produced
Star
by
Trek
Bethesda.
Alliances or whatever.
Star Trek Legacy.
Legacy. That was a fun game. I remember.
It was. It was. I mean, first of all, it was gorgeous to look at. You get to see a good chunk of the ships. And then it kind of ran back into like the Vulcan, some Vulcan lady trying to take over for to get in contact with, as it wasn't V'ger or even the pre-Borg, and I forgot. It's been a long time. I've got it hanging around somewhere in my house, but I have no idea where it actually is. But yeah, that kind of brought that whole concept of V'ger is the one that created the Borg, and then it brought in all 5 captains. You know how every single one had to deal with the Borg in their own way.
Yeah,
and that was just beyond excellent. There are very, very few games where you get the chance to see Cisco involved.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody else has at least been in the game in a video game in some port, but this is the only one to memory, with the exception of maybe there is another DS9 game where I think he has lent his voice. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Well, you know, hey guys, with that being said, we're getting up on about an hour and a half, and yeah, we're getting up to about an hour and a half, and I want to not take us too long past that. Yeah. So we will obviously talk about the Borg again, because we only we spent an hour and a half, and we only touched on barely 6 episodes and 1 movie.
Yep.
I mean, we got all of Voyager, a little bit of DS9. I mean, we could talk Scorpion and probably make a whole episode, a whole hour and a half episode out of that.
I've got at least 3 video games to talk about.
Hey, with that being said, guys, hey, hold on a second, Ambassador.
No, you're fine.
With that being said, we're getting close to the wire. I need to call it a night for the channel, but I want to thank everyone who has been in this panel. I want to thank the Ambassador. I want to thank Mir. I want to thank Dark Haster. I want to thank Brian, Master of None. You guys have been fantastic, and you are proving, all of you are proving why I wanted to start this channel. Diversity of thought, and we are taking Star Trek and we are breaking it down in the most fun way possible and having a blast doing it. And I want to thank you all very much for being here. And with that being said, we will get back to the Borg eventually. Next week, Madam Geek, my wife, is going to join us with her idea for a Star Trek panel. She wants to talk Star Trek doctors.
Oh, hell yeah.
I love that idea.
So that is going to, so Star Trek Doctors is going to be next week. Madam Geek is going to be joining us. For anybody who has not seen my wife on a chat, she is way better pleasing on the eyes than I am and has a much better voice. So we should get a little bit of a better boost on that. But with that being said, if you don't know this, I have a rule. Everybody who is on my channel, if you have something to plug, you must plug it. So we're going to start at the bottom. Brian, Master of None, plug your channel.
All right, my channel's
what you need to.
Yeah, no problem. My channel's Brian Hill, Master of None. I just got up to 40 subscribers, so super happy about that.
Awesome, buddy.
Thanks to all you guys. Couldn't have done it without any of your guys' help. I haven't been really working on much lately. My work schedule's all over the place, so I don't know if I'm working nights or days or what day of the week I'm working most weeks. So usually I just like to collaborate and come on talk. I love talking about Star Trek, and I love talking about movies with people and having good conversations, man.
We love having you, dude.
We love having you. Sorry, cough there.
No worries. I love being here. It's great.
Yeah, no, man, it's great to have you too. And Darth Haster, this is. I hope you had. Sorry, I was thinking of something else when I started that conversation. I hope you had a great time. And what do you have to plug? What do you have to plug for yourself?
My channel is Darth Haster on YouTube. I do video games and talk, and sometimes guest on other people's streams talking movies and pop culture and basically the psychology of and behaviors of characters. Kind of. That's what I was here for. I kind of really get into that, the deep dive into like characters.
Oh, awesome. Well, I hope you had a good experience with us.
I enjoyed this. This was actually fun seeing everybody's take on it and knowing that I'm not alone in my thoughts. This is quite refreshing.
You are definitely not alone. There is a whole cornucopia of weird motherfuckers out there.
Well, I just jumped right, swan dive right into the cornucopia of weirdness. Then
hell yeah, man. We'll save a seat.
Hell yeah, man. Yeah, we'll keep the seat warm for you, buddy. I'm glad you had a good time. Mir, I know unless you've started a channel, I don't think you have.
No, but I do have something to plug.
Go for it, buddy.
Okay, so yeah, I will be starting. I've got like 2 weeks left before my school is out for the summer, and at that point,
yes. Oh man,
yes.
I know you've been stressing over all that.
I am like a nervous wreck over here because of the amount of crap that I have to do. But what I would love to plug for you guys is this is all like conversation related for tonight. Go onto YouTube and look up the Star Trek Borg exhibit that was at the Star Trek Experience. It only ran for a couple of years. I was fortunate enough to see it in person. It scared the ever-loving shit out of me. It was terrifying to me. It just, God, it's may have been, 15 years ago, easily. But yeah, I just recommend anyone go and check out the ride. I know it's on there on the YouTubes, and it is definitely worth watching. And with that, I yield.
That's awesome, Mary. Yeah, Mir. I actually had the luck of getting to see the Star Trek Experience. I don't remember if I saw the Borg, but I had a great time there. I got to sit in Quark's bar. I got to drink a Romulan ale.
We'll talk about that afterwards.
Yeah, we'll talk about that afterwards, man. It was awesome.
Yeah.
With that being said, all right. The ambassador, the man who has always been here. If you don't know that reference, you have not seen Babylon 5. And if you haven't seen Babylon 5, you are wrong. You need to see this show. You need to review this man's episodes. This man is awesome. The ambassador, plug your stuff, buddy.
Well, before I plug myself, I want to send a shout out to a friend of many of us and everything. Mr. Stone Loki and his Mornings of Mischief hit 400 subscribers today.
Woohoo!
So, congratulations.
Congratulations. And I helped.
Congratulations.
Oh, you think you helped. I helped. I'm the one who said it.
Loki, if you hear this, congratulations.
That's
my friend.
awesome.
It is well deserved. As for myself, I am obviously the ambassador. You can find me on YouTube under simply the ambassador. I cover pop culture of the 80s and 90s into the modern era. I talk about all the geeky, nerdy stuff from those decades and even into, again, the modern era. This week, I will be co-hosting with my good friend Kathia Starr on her channel and everything. We'll be continuing our review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And then this weekend on my channel, Saturday night at 7:30 Central Time, we're going to delve into a great franchise from the 1990s. We're going to be talking about Jurassic Park. So hope to see you all there. I've pretty much got my channel. I've pretty much got my channel rounded, or my panel rounded out for that one. So, but coming up in a couple weeks, give or take, going to be hosting my very first watch party on my channel. We're going to be watching, again, another great 90s classic. We're going to be doing a watch party for Tombstone. So be sure to keep your eyes and ears open for that.
Oh, shit. No way.
Break out the Val Kilmer, man.
Oh, man. I'm your Huckleberry, baby. I'm going to put that up and I'm going to watch it with you.
Okay. One other thing I do want to mention about my channel, I am 14 subscribers away from 300. And as I have
helped.
I know you have, and
sorry, there's a theme.
It's okay, Mary. You're good, my friend. Once I hit 300, as I have been promoting, once I hit 300, I will keep my promise, and we will do a 90s music discussion and karaoke nights. So if you want to see that happen, get me to 300.
It's going down.
So, and again, I want to thank my good friend to the left or right of me, Jesse Nobody Geek, for having me up as a part of this panel. It has been a blast talking about Star Trek, even though I'm technically not a Trekkie. I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm a Jedi, but I still love Trek, and I love talking Trek with everybody here. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you catch us on the replay, make sure you hit that like and share and subscribe to this wonderful guy, Nobody Geek Jesse. And he is not a nobody. He is a somebody, and he is a good friend, and he is a good egg. So with that being said, I yield the floor.
All right, before we call it a night, I'm just going to say this. I am Nobody Geek. This is my channel. Let's talk Star Trek. 10 Forward Roundtable. Our goal is to have fun, to have a blast, and to walk away saying, with diversity of thought. That's a big thing that I think we're missing in culture now is diversity of thought. I want different opinions. I mean, Mir brought up, I think it was Mir. I'm pretty sure it was Mir. Brought up a whole different perspective of the Borg I never considered. And I was like, that was awesome. And that is what I want this channel to be about. So I do this once a week right now. I guest panel on anybody's channel who's willing to have me. I was on Jedi Bills a little bit during his marathon. And hey, look, folks, we're a great community. We are all about taking care of each other. We are all about being fans of each other. We're out here doing what we can. We're small channels, and you know what? That's okay. We're all good. It's all about having fun. And for me right now, it's Let's Talk Star Trek. Maybe one day I'll expand it, but there's so much to talk about. I mean, we talked an hour and 20 minutes about the Borg, and we didn't even make it through TNG. So there is a lot to talk about. We've got a lot of material we're going to be covering, and I want people like the Ambassador, Mir, Darth Haster, Brian, Stone Loki, Chef Zilla, Sammy Joe, Purple Lady, all these wonderful people. I love having people on, Kat, I'll have Kathy. So I'll have anybody on here who wants to come on here and have fun talking Star Trek 6605. And if you love Star Trek Discovery and you love Picard, that's okay. You can come to this channel and listen to us. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't like those shows, but I will respect your opinion on why you like them. But I will not treat you like crap. We don't do that here. We are not a negative. We are not a negative group of people. You want negativity? Go watch some politics.
Well, no, I like the new iterations of Star Trek, and we have, I think basically my thing is on it, the new stuff is I try to keep an open mind for now, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think it's decent sci-fi, but it's not Trek. So if you're coming on this show expecting to know what the hell we're talking about,
yeah.
not so much, not so much at all.
And I do agree with that. I mean, when Rick Berman wasn't the producer anymore, I think Gene Roddenberry's vision kind of died with it, and that was after 2005. So, I mean,
but like I said, that's why I said, we're limited. I try to limit. But hey, Brian, as I tell people before I sign off here and close this off, I'm actually a fan of the J.J. Abrams movies. I like those Star Trek movies. I actually thought they were good. So I don't hate that stuff. And I understand it. Yes, I don't like Discovery. I don't like Picard. But that being said, I don't want people to come here being discouraged, thinking we're never going to talk Picard.
Well, no,
we will. We definitely.
I'm basically saying you guys haven't attacked me for liking it. You know what I'm saying? And that's cool. You know,
well, wait 15 minutes.
Wait till we get off here.
Yeah, wait till we hit the broadcast, buddy. All right. With that being said,
oh my gosh.
I will be back. I will be back next. All right. We do these Let's Talk Star Treks on Monday, 6:30 Eastern Daylight Time right now. I hope everyone had fun. I am thankful very much for the panel I had. And with that, peace and long life. Live long and prosper.
Yeah, my hands
live long
up.
and prosper.
Just my hands up is just see if my computer's pretty.
That still is a good comment.
It is.
Yeah.